It has been a season full of twists and turns, and today is no different. Penn State practice wrapped up yesterday. We got to talk to James Franklin afterwards. Some interesting things going on for Penn State football heading into their game against Rutgers. It's senior day. I'm here with senior editor Nate Bauer. Are you ever going to graduate, Nate? You've been a senior editor for a while.
No. This is year like 16 of being a super senior. So I got frat secretary. I'm crushing it. It's
you're
great.
You're like
for that right there.
You're like Ryan Reynolds and Van Wilder.
Yeah, no, it's
some people go to school for 8 years. Yes, they're doctors.
Hey, yeah, but it's worth it. It's a great time.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's a fair point. Yesterday, we got to see practice, and just I think by happenstance, most everyone was down over with the offense last night, checking out what's going on that side of the ball. Typically, so everyone knows how it works, is there's two practice fields, and then there's a turf field. And the offense works on one, and the defense works on the other. And then the offensive line works on the turf field, because they would rip up the practice field if they were on the grass. So they're on opposite ends of the practice facility, and everyone was down with the offense. And it turns out that there was a good reason for that. As we heard yesterday after practice, multiple starters along the offensive line have been missing this week. Nate, can you fill us in on what's going on and what James Franklin said after practice?
Yeah, so there is a non-COVID flu making its way around Penn State's campus. Like, it's beyond just football. It's just a lot of students are getting the flu right now. And so what James Franklin said last night was that there have been 6 players, I believe, that have all had flu-related symptoms, fevers, like that kind of stuff this week, and have subsequently missed practice time. And I can't say don't quote me because I'm speaking into a microphone, but pretty sure that he included Rasheed Walker, Mike Miranda, and Caedan Wallace all in that group, which
you cut out slightly.
You
cut out slightly there. Rasheed Walker, Caedan Wallace, Mike Miranda were the 3 that you mentioned, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
So
and so
there's
of six. I didn't notice anybody else like that would have been among those other 3. But I was just on the I was just looking at the offensive side of the ball. So
yeah.
But 3 starting offensive linemen.
So there goes, and I said this to Nate off air. It was like, normally at the end of the show, we do a preview of the game. I'll give you what I've seen on film, and we can still do that, but any analysis I have at this point without your starting tackles and one of your starting interior linemen, does it matter? Because now we're throwing completely unknown variables into the situation. James Franklin was asked about young players. Landon Tangwall came up. So yesterday we spent a good number of minutes watching the offensive line players that were taking one-on-one drills against the defensive linemen. What were your impressions if you saw any of that stuff as far as how he was performing in those situations?
Yeah, no, I mean, the drill is built for the offensive line to lose. There's no help, right? There's no interior help. And so when you've got a tackle up against a shifty defensive end, of which Penn State is bountiful, right? Like, they just get beat. So that was the. Yeah, I'm always cautious about those kinds of things in the first place, but I thought in particular, Zariah Fisher, Arnold Ebiketie, those guys were winning those reps. And so that was
against all of the linemen, not just Tangwall.
Correct. I mean, it was just across the board. Those guys were losing those reps, as they probably should when you can't direct anybody toward a guard to help you with the situation.
Yeah, and we'll show you the practice video here in just a little bit, but also if you want to go watch it, we have a live highlight montage over on our YouTube channel. So if you're listening to this on podcast version, Blue White Illustrated video on YouTube. If you want to check that out, we have the practice video. And of course, if you're watching here on YouTube, I'll be pulling it up in a little bit once we get to one of the other topics that came up yesterday, because that starts the video. And that would be the newly minted backup quarterback, Christian Veilleux. Sort of. So fill us in on that situation, what James Franklin said last night, and what's your read going forward?
Yeah, I like, if I'm being honest, there was enough buzz coming out of preseason camp about Veilleux that I was a little surprised that James Franklin kind of contextualized the competition as not being that close, as though Roberson were the far and away winner. And he said that the August 22, 24, something like that, right? Like, so a couple of weeks before the start of the season. For them to make that decision now, I think it was a little bit of an inevitability. Like, I just think that, right? I mean, I don't know. I saw what I saw. You saw Roberson just, it wasn't good at Iowa, obviously, in the time since. Are you getting better or are you staying the same? And so for Christian Veilleux, who already had tools to work with, and I think, like I said, had some buzz coming out of preseason camp. It made its point. I think that the caveat to all of this is Penn State's backup quarterback doesn't matter on this team until it does.
Right.
And, right. And so, like, you are not playing either one of those guys unless you absolutely have to. Sean Clifford on a stretcher, right? Completely unable to play. However, Penn State has seen this year that happened once. And so, given the fact that Clifford has been under duress through most of the second half of the season in particular, that is a factor that could come into play when, especially in the context of Penn State potentially missing a few offensive linemen.
And it also comes into context of, part of the analysis is Rutgers isn't very good. They're a tough physical football team, but they lack explosiveness. They lack playmakers on offense. They lack some critical discipline and talent in the secondary. But if you don't have your offensive line, you're not going to see backup quarterback Christian Veilleux come in against Rutgers. That's going to be part of the story. I guess from the long, when I'm looking at this particular topic, and we got some questions coming up in our mailbag segment, we'll kind of answer some of that now, because the topic is paramount. Coming out of last night from James Franklin said is, so Christian Veilleux, what he needed was time. He's got the physical tools. People have been asking and clamoring for more information from me about, so what's he like? What does he do? Well, for the most part this season, we've been focusing on Sean Clifford. Now that the team is not going to any relevance in the postseason, the shifting focus now is to the future, based on what everyone's asking about, what everyone's looking at. And Veilleux's always had the physical skills going back to high school. Big frame, 6'4", really good whippy arm. I wouldn't say elite arm strength, but can put velocity on the ball. But he needed to grow into his frame, and he needed time to learn football. Like, he needed time to mentally digest the game. As a guy who came from Canada, missed a season because of COVID in high school, and is a true freshman that enrolled early. To me, what this signals is the mental aspect of the game has caught up for Christian Veilleux, to where he is now on par with Ta'Quan Roberson, and his physical skills and his ceiling are higher. So therefore, there's no reason that he is the number 3 quarterback. If they feel that the mental aspect has caught up in the offense for him, which this is the point of going into next season. Another question people keep asking is, Drew Aller, play him now. It's not a question, it's a statement that I get from everybody, including some of my close friends, and I'm like, just hold on. If Christian Veilleux took until week, 12 of the college football season, to be the backup quarterback, to beat out Ta'Quan Roberson, who we've looked at, and I think everyone goes, just doesn't have it. That should give you a timeline of how long it takes to learn the offense. It's been almost a full calendar year that he's been at Penn State as an early enrollee. So that's football is a hard sport, man. It is a hard sport from a mental processing standpoint. It took Sean Clifford 5 years to get to the point where he was operating at an advanced level. It's going to take these kids a while to learn the basics of, not the basics, but the basics of the college game before they can get on to the nuanced stuff. So that's what Veilleux, I think, to me, that's what this signals, is that he's been closing the gap on the mental side, and Roberson physically and mentally hasn't taken a leap to that next level of a guy who's been in the program for 3 seasons. So I think that's where we are, and if you do see Veilleux, then we're going to start evaluating whether or not he can be the starter next year. I think that is a fair conversation to have over the next month or so as Penn State wraps up 2021.
Yeah, I mean, people always point to other programs who have had true freshmen who made their first seasons. Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields.
Two things about that. Justin Fields did not play as a true freshman. He came in packages. And Trevor Lawrence, first off,
correct,
exceptional player, right? So exception to the rule in certain situations. Also was throwing to T. Higgins and Justin Ross. Also Hunter Renfrow, who is now an NFL receiver in the slot, and had Travis Etienne in the backfield.
That's my point.
It's not just the quarterback.
And those guys still did not start until, Lawrence didn't start halfway through that season.
Yep.
So they're unicorns, guys. They don't exist in the real world. And so for that to be the expectation, and obviously look, Penn State has a relatively recent couple of examples in Rob Bolden and Christian Hackenberg, both started as true freshmen, but I think even in retrospect, if there were other options that Penn State felt confident in those situations, they probably would have opted not to do that, right?
Yeah. How did that work out?
Worst case scenario.
How did that work out for Christian Hackenberg? Let me ask you.
Yeah, it crushed him. It crushed him.
Yeah.
And he had some success his freshman year. I don't think that there's any question about that. But none of this stuff happens in a vacuum. That's my overarching argument to a lot of this stuff, is that what happens in one game has an impact on the next game, or right. And it's this constant state of building. And so you have learned tendencies, and what you don't want to do is break the shiny new toy that you got before you know how to use it. And that's the whole deal, is that the toy, and to me, and you can speak to this, I'm sure, it is the greatest irony of the NFL that the best quarterbacks all inevitably go to the worst teams. Yeah. And so, but Mac Jones, on the other hand, gets to get to a spot that allows for him, has the pieces around him where you can have some success, you can experience some success, and it allows you to be pretty good, right? Yeah. But when you get into a situation that isn't ready to handle you as an offense, which, look, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but Penn State's offense isn't good right now. They're not in a good spot. Yeah. The offensive line is not in a good spot. So unless things dramatically change, then you do not want to ruin whoever the quarterback is, whether it's Prbula or Aller. Either way, or to myself in that situation.
To my point too, or Veilleux. Everybody is looking past Christian Veilleux. Everybody
for sure.
is. And
but,
I think
but
that
at least he has that.
Yeah.
Right? Like at least he's had this year. Like you're in a much better spot having him been able to experience a year of development before having to potentially embark on that scenario.
That's
Though
the
obviously
that's the goal. That is the goal of having a redshirt year. And he'll have, by the time it gets to fall of 2022, he will have been in Mike Yurcich's offense for a year and a half. He will have been developing the strength and conditioning program for 2 winter cycles. You don't replicate that time. You can't just magically make that different. And if there is some situation where one of the 2 young quarterbacks beats him out, based on what we've seen this year, as far as him being able to fight for, contend, and now at this point in the week-to-week battle for the backup quarterback job, be able to take it from a veteran, then those guys, they're special. And you're right, you got your unicorn. But that shouldn't be plan A. So this is a conversation that happens all the time. We're going to have this conversation all offseason long. Another conversation we've been having all season, and another thing that came up as a topic of conversation with James Franklin yesterday was the progress that the program is making. And he talked about, he said, and this is the quote, hopefully we can get into some specifics soon. So how do you take that? And as somebody who's been a part of this conversation, what is your thought about what soon means?
Yeah. What soon means is, I mean, certainly I don't think it's like imminent necessarily, but I think that he's been laying cookie crumbs out there, hinting, one, that he would like to remain Penn State's head coach, right? With the caveat of accompanied by a tremendous commitment from the institution Penn State towards its football program. Like, that's the bottom line, is getting all of those things, synergy, alignment, whatever you want to call it, but everybody diving into the pool, and not just diving into the pool, but like unreluctantly, just wholeheartedly getting into it and all wanting the same things. And I think that it has never really been a question of, does Penn State football want to win, right? Like, obviously James Franklin does. And I don't think there's any question that the university, the athletic department wants a winning football team. They have made strides in those areas to demonstrate, some of the things that they're willing to do. They are willing to have coordinators that make 7 figures, right? Like, they're willing to have to compete in that space. They have a project for $47,800 that is currently underway in the parking lot behind the Lash building. They've already made some renovations to the lobby of the Lash building and some of the team meeting rooms, and the locker room is new. Like, those are all demonstrations of that want. However, there's a lot to do. There really is. There's a lot to do for Penn State to match some of its competitors nationally. And when I say some of, I mean almost all. Like, that is not an understatement. This is a nation trend of how programs want to operate and the commitment that they're demonstrating.
And if you want to see what Nate is talking about, just peruse his Twitter. You've been retweeting other universities and their announcements of their facilities renovations. So if you want an idea of who he's talking about, it's not just Ohio State or Clemson or Alabama.
And there are YouTube pages, right? Like, just about this. It's not going to come to my head, but maybe link it as like the next video after this, of literally just a dude being toured around Oklahoma's facility, Gonzaga basketball, like all of the top college program. I mean, like a $200 million Oklahoma State baseball renovation. Like, I mean, there are these massive numbers, massive commitments that are being made in college athletics to producing winning programs. And Penn State really should not be all that unfamiliar with this, in the sense that Penn State had a club hockey team for forever. And Terry Pegula came in, wrote a $100 million check, and now it has a nationally competitive men's D1 hockey program. Like, that's what it is. that's what all of this is about.
Yeah, and part of it is, you know, one of the larger things that people talk about is the donor base and the largest alumni association in the world and all those things from Penn State. But the billionaires, the donors that have the deepest pockets that can make real differences, does Penn State have those to accelerate this process? And then you get into the conversation of, if you have those, do you have people that are then too meddling when it comes to the influence they have? Because right now, at least the way I read it, is the real power brokers outside of the people that you know about are the board of trustees, which always cycles over, but those are prominent figures in politics and in industry, and those people are kind of the influencers that in other places, especially in Texas or down south, tend to be deep-pocketed alums that are fanatical about the program. I guess, is that a fair assessment of how that would work in your opinion, or are there guys or things I'm not considering when it comes to what Sandy Barber's job or the next athletic director after her, when it comes to the ability to get more donations, to get this to accelerate, and then not because that's, I think, a part of it. The other part is where you're allocating your resources, that the revenue you're generating as a university is, because a lot of this stuff nationally is also coming from donors. It's not just the athletic budget. It's kind of a bit of both. And it seems like, from what I've seen, Penn State is lagging behind in both areas.
So look, like, the numbers that are out there are not, they're too high for all of these programs and schools to just have one person writing a check and then it's done, right? Like, the money comes in before they're willing to work on these projects. They're financed, guys. Like, these are financed projects. You got to borrow money, and it comes from future revenues. It comes from the endowment. Like any variety of different pools of funds. You got to be creative. Like, there are a lot of different ways to do this. But my point is that most of these places, and when I say most of, I mean like 99%, don't have a deposit into the bank account and then a shovel in the dirt the next day. That's not how it works. That's just, it's not.
Here I am thinking in regular person financial terms. Here I am not moving large enough levers quickly enough. Because that's a fair point.
No, but like,
that's a fair point.
But like, when you buy a house, most people aren't buying it in cash. Like, you're going to a bank and you're willing to pay the 4% or whatever the rate is on a house now. Like, that's how the world works. So
no, Nate, as somebody who has been to an open house recently, when you walked in, the answer was there are already 2 offers, so you'll need to make your offer by today, and it has to be a firm offer. Also, it has to be $20,000 over asking price. So if
I feel you, I get it. But like, you go to the bank and have that. That's it, is just you got to finance these projects.
Yeah.
And Penn State is in a position where, I get it. It's complicated. It is a independently operated arm of the university, right? So like, Penn State athletics does not borrow from Penn State university to be able to do what it wants to do. Typically,
Mhm.
That might have to change. There might have to be some operational things that that shift for Penn State to be able to do that, or to do some of these projects, do some of the things that Penn State would need to do to catch up to the way that the rest of the entire landscape of college football has gone over the last 10 to 15 years. And so that's, back to the original statement of hoping that, James Frank, hopefully we'll be able to get into specifics here soon. That's what that means is
Mhm.
is Penn State going to commit to doing all of these things to be competitive in that space. And I think that statement is a suggestion that Penn State is, and that he is attached to that.
And
That is a shared goal.
I don't know if it's ironic that it's coming during one of the worst actual seasons that James Franklin has had, non-COVID seasons during his time at Penn State, knowing that there aren't any sort of limiting factors that there were early in his career. This is probably the true first down year that he's had in terms of an unsuccessful campaign, and we're having these conversations and might get resolution to these spending things at a place where people are unhappy at 6-4.
Yeah.
And is that does that underscore his point, or does that undercut his point?
People have got to stop framing this in the micro. The health of the program is not about who your head coach is. Like, I understand Nick Saban, right, was a guy at Alabama who, yes, you want to lead the program and has had a ton of success. I get it. But you don't make that investment into your football program because of who your head coach is. You make it because you want it to be positioned for success no matter who the guy is. Legitimately, like, do you think that Alabama football is realistically going to fall off the face of a cliff when Nick Saban retires? UNC basketball, Duke basketball, right? Like, you've got these titans of their sports with all the success in college men's basketball, football, what have you. But all of those programs are positioned to maintain their success regardless of who the head coach is. And that is the whole point of this. Is it's not about this season. It's not even about James Franklin. It's, what do you want to be? And it's a decision.
So let me ask you this.
What do you want to be?
I want to wrap up with this because I promised we'd get you to breakfast. This is all being framed on James Franklin.
Yeah.
So that is a part of the story because it's his job to inserting himself into this narrative. And I know that you're pulling back and saying, look at the broader picture, look at the bigger picture because of what the university is doing, regardless of the head coach. But he is the guy that is the inciting incident for this change. So how do you not view him as a part of that? How do you not view him as a part of the tangible differences that might happen at Penn State going forward?
Because he's not. The guy who did it was Bill O'Brien. He was the first. As soon as he got to Penn State, he started complaining about not having appropriate film machines, right? That's one of the things that we all remember is him talking about having to watch on VHS, like some of the film. Right? Like, it was this like, the point is, everyone is trying to frame this as though this is something that's new. But James Franklin has been talking about this from the day that he got to Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there was some lead-in time. You don't want to start with that. Like, that's not how you want to arrive. Hey, I'm here now. Change everything that you're doing. That's not
right.
Like, that's not how any coach operates. But Bill O'Brien saying the exact same things in 2012 as James Franklin started to say in, the spring of 2014, right? During the offseason. Like, these are off-season conversations that have to filter into the season based on some of the other happenings that have taken place, right? With some of the other job openings nationally, like, understood.
Yeah.
But
I don't think that people truly, you do, and that's why you're here. That's why you're answering these questions. And by the way, thank you. I'm getting an education here, and I feel like I'm a well-versed person in this particular area. People don't understand that. And I think there's a certain population of people that don't care, and they just want to see results, that we're setting those people aside. Most people don't know about these things. Most people probably don't know about Bill O'Brien saying those things, and the memory of this is very short, because a lot of people, what they do is they tune in on Saturdays. And then if you really love this, you're listening to this show, and you're probably the most educated Penn State fan if you're watching this particular show. Not to be arrogant about what we do, but like, you're taking the time to go listen to 25, what are we at now? 31 minutes. 31 minutes of this particular conversation. So the public is not educated about this particular topic on a large scale. So that's, I guess, the thing is James Franklin has brought it up and has made this a point, because you're right, he has brought this up in years past in off seasons and in vague ways, but it has been, I think, in a large sense, a topic that as soon as it's brought up, it's a board meeting, so then everyone tunes out. But now it's come to the point where people can't ignore it. Just like we can't ignore the fact that we have to move on and we have to answer some questions.
No.
What's on your mind? This is a perfectly sponsorable segment, by the way. Questions for T. Frank and Nate. I take these on Twitter, and I answer them with Nate here on our segment in the middle of our Thursday show. Let's start with this one. I actually have two here, from B. Furman 12 and from Christian Molnar. Is there hope for improved QB play next year? And with only a few games remaining, how important is it for Penn State to get quality snaps from backup QBs, especially Christian Veilleux? We talked about this early as far as Veilleux. Should you have, to Brandon's point, should you have hope for improved quarterback play next year?
I don't think it's been bad this year.
I would agree.
When Sean Clifford has been healthy. And so I think that the hope for Penn State fans should be that the next guy can approximate Sean Clifford's performance. I think that would be a very good result. I think that the hope for Penn State fans should be an approximation of his performance, and then big strides on the offensive line, at tight end, and at running back.
Yes. I think that's a great way to frame that. And an approximation of Sean Clifford's performance just means being a quality starter, because what Sean Clifford doesn't deliver you is any of the gigantic upside plays. He doesn't deliver you anything that is a special throw necessarily. Which is another question we got about, like, what's wrong with Sean Clifford? Seems to hold on to the ball forever. Yeah, so the high level plays of throwing the ball into zones as they open and close, hitting windows, he doesn't necessarily do that. He hits comeback routes. He has done a better job with the tight ends this year. Theo Johnson has been much better as far as a target up the seam, but we're now at the end of his career at Penn State, I would assume. So you need to have somebody who can replicate some of that next year with an improved everything else, as you talked about. And this kind of bleeds into the conversation about Rutgers is you're not going to get that opportunity this weekend if everything holds the way we've seen it. Even if two of those offensive linemen come back, they spent all week being sick. And I don't know if you've ever tried to recover from the flu and then go to the gym. Now imagine that, but you're doing elite physical activity. I don't see a good performance from the Penn State offense this week, and some people are going to be unhappy about that, but the reality is these guys had the flu, and they're not Michael Jordan. Like, let's remember that too. Not everyone is going to have an epic flu game.
I mean, have you seen a good offensive performance from this Penn State team when everyone was healthy?
Right. Okay, so this one is just off the conversation we just had. David Greeter asks if James Franklin had to list 3 things he thought were important to improve the program moving forward to compete for national titles, what would they be in your opinion? Quick, give me 2 or 3. I'll allow you to do 2 if there are 2 that you think are paramount of importance.
I think Haluba Hall needs work. Penn State's practice facility for sure. They already have some construction underway at Lash. The upstairs of Lash needs to be done for the coaches and staff, which has expanded dramatically with James Franklin, right? Like the staff size nationally is a big trend, but it has definitely expanded to where they don't have the office space, the meeting space that they need for the staff size that they have. But I forget 3. It's attitude.
Right.
It's just right. It's just
people want a checklist.
It's about what you want to do.
People like David, and I understand this. Of like my wife said the other day, and my in-laws are coming on Monday, and I can sense the tension building as far as we've got to get ready because my mom's going to be here. So it's not my mom, so I don't have that tension, and I don't know the list of things that we need to do. And that's, I think, how people feel is, okay, if I have a list of 5 things, let's get them accomplished, let's move on, let's get this thing done. But to your point, and to my wife's point, it's the attitude of, why aren't you thinking of these things to fix? Because we need to fix these things. Is that a fair way to put that?
How about this? What your wife is thinking is, aren't you looking around the house constantly and just doing it?
Yes, that's what I mean. Yep.
Whatever you see, like, just do it. And you shouldn't even have to ask her, hey, honey, should I empty the dishwasher with its clean dishes? You know that those dishes need to be put away.
You think we have a
dishwasher.
Know that. You're adorable.
I know that. I know that.
Yeah.
So no, that's the basic premise of all of this is just if you're not looking for ways to improve constantly, you're not trying.
Yeah.
That's it.
So this is another great question that I think is one that Penn State fans have asked me quite a bit. How do we quantify the season for Penn State football that they've had from where they started to where it is now? Because this is a large frustration that we talked about a little bit on our Monday live show. If you want to go back and watch that again, of Penn State was 5-0 and now they're 6-4. How do you view this season from beginning to end as a narrative, and how should fans feel about it? It's a thinker. Ryan asks good questions.
Yeah, it's tough because I think that the schedule was always going to be difficult, but it's probably actually more difficult than anyone anticipated. At Wisconsin to start the season, everyone knew that was going to be difficult. What people didn't know is Michigan, coming off of a 2-4 season, was going to be the number 6 team in the country when they came to Penn State in November with 1 loss. What Penn State fans didn't know was that Michigan State would be 9-1 and projecting to potentially 9-2 by the time that Penn State faces them. But point being is nobody knew that Michigan State would be that good.
Yeah. Coming off of last season, you would have thought those 2 teams in particular would have been below Penn State in the pecking order based on, again, the false things we all learned from COVID about how Michigan had the same situation that Penn State did last year where they didn't have a healthy quarterback for large stretches of the season. Watch what happens when they have a healthy quarterback and they have some time to tinker with their offense.
I am so fixated on this right now, and I can't get off of it. I don't understand how we're talking about the 2020 season as a real thing.
Yeah.
Because Michigan's the team that I'm looking at. Michigan went 2-4 last season. They lost to Penn State. They didn't play their last 3 games. their last 3 games were included Iowa, which had won 7 games to end the season, or 6, whatever it was. They went on a big winning streak, and Ohio State. Like, Michigan very easily could have gone 2-6, 2-7 last season. But the fact that they had COVID or there were cancellations, whatever, Penn went 4-5 because they played all of their games. And so I wonder how Penn State's season might have looked if after the Indiana game, when everything went colossally wrong, a couple of guys got COVID and didn't play the Ohio State game or didn't play the Iowa game, right? Like,
right.
It's very hard for me to be able to try to compare things and talk rationally from the 2020 season when not everyone played the same amount of games. And when I say not everyone, I mean literally no one played the same amount of games.
Yeah.
Nor against comparable schedules. So I don't know.
So back to this season, when you look at how this particular season unfolded, the fact that they were able to weather the storm early, I think that it just goes to show, first off, the difficulty of their schedule start to finish, and then the fragility, something you've talked about this season, of the narrow path they had to walk to success. And when they stumbled off of it, they have not been able to get back on. And I think that's the part that's been frustrating for Penn State fans, is you do see the games against Michigan that they should have won. Truthfully. And this is, you always get this from people, but like, there's no reason that offense should have been superior, because it wasn't. Penn State just didn't play well offensively, and the defense for Michigan was good. And when you have that mix of things, Penn State has beaten comparable teams so far this season. They have beaten comparable teams to Michigan. I don't think Michigan is as good as their record. That being said, they have some overwhelming strengths and some lack of weaknesses that made them the better team on Saturday. But if Penn State was able to, they could have won that game. I don't necessarily think there was another game on their schedule with the way it played out where they was, we should have won X, because the injuries to Sean Clifford happened. You could, if and but and or, against Michigan, he was healthy. You had your full complement on offense as far as what you're going to have at that point in the season. And they missed that game, but the rest of them, it just, as you pointed out, shows how fragile that season was in particular.
I think that some of the frustration of Penn State fans is tied to the notion that they could have won 3 of the 4 games that they lost.
Yeah.
They could have beaten Iowa even without Sean Clifford. You don't have to give up a 40 touchdown on a trick play at the end of the game. Like, you don't have to necessarily lose that game. You definitely did not have to lose Illinois, excuse me.
Yep.
There were plenty of opportunities for Penn State to win that game. And I mean, plenty of opportunities, including playing like garbage for 4 quarters and still having a chance to win in 9 overtime. Like, there were so many chances for Penn State to, on the last play of the game, like, be the last play, a walk-off win. Penn State had those opportunities, didn't do it. And at Ohio State, I don't think you blame them, right? Like, it is what it is. Ohio State's just really good. But Michigan, same deal, is you don't have to lose that game. I understand that conversation. My argument, however, to the converse is Penn State easily could have lost at Wisconsin, and Penn State easily could have lost to Auburn. So really, in those games that are decided by single-digit points, Penn State is 2-4, which is not exactly what you want. Obviously, you want to be 6-0, but it's also not 0-6.
Yeah. You can settle for 4-2 or 5-1. You don't need to be 6-0, but you do need to be on the plus side of that. Our next question comes from Peter, and he says, the Lawnmower 4.0 spot on the last daily was fire. Appreciate that. I was told that I wasn't classy enough before, so I classed it up a little bit. Seems like Clifford holds on the ball too long, and our receiver's getting open. Is he afraid to throw to a spot, and is he taking too long with his progression? What's the deal? And if Peter is referring to specifically the Michigan game, it's a little bit of everything, and that's what I said coming into the game is Penn State's receivers are going to have to win more than they lose against the Michigan defenders, because you can win some of those reps, but Michigan, when they play single coverage, one of two things is going to happen. Clifford is going to break the pocket, and he's going to scramble, or he's going to get sacked, because those have been kind of the situations that he's seen so far this year. There were times when Michigan got Penn State, and this happens in every game, where the offense calls a play, and the defense, they figured it out, and they ran the right coverage. That happens to every offensive coordinator. There are some plays you just lose, because that's the nature of contests. That's the name of competition. That's what happens. You don't win every single one of them. The problems that we're running into, yes, you do. You absolutely do. You're a winner in all things because you've chosen to be, and that mindset will get you very far. The problem with Sean Clifford was, unlike Cade McNamara, when he got into a sticky spot, Cade McNamara would dump the ball off, or let me phrase that. He was never put in that situation because Michigan's offense plays scared. And again, I'm going to talk about this because they ran crossing routes and scored 21 points. They ran routes that were 4 yards deep and ran the ball almost 50 times. That shouldn't win. That shouldn't win because Sean Clifford and that offense are more aggressive and they're more explosive, and they proved it with better concepts down the field. They just couldn't get in the end zone. And that's where you got to give credit to Michigan, is the red zone defense was good, unlike Penn State's, Joey Porter Jr. specifically, that gave up 2 touchdowns on Saturday. So Sean Clifford, it's a little bit of column A, a little column B, but to me, as I've said before, that's who he is. He's not going to deliver you the epic performance that's going to win you games. He's going to keep you in them and give you the opportunity for those, but he's not going to always deliver. I think we've seen that pretty clearly so far. This comes from Tom G, PSU number 1. Do you believe the problems at wide receiver below Dotson, Franklin could look to bring in a transfer portal wide receiver? This is something I talked about on the Daily on Monday or Tuesday, as far as Penn State's reluctance to get into the transfer portal, I think got them into the situation they're in this year. Do you think they've done enough on the recruiting side of things to avoid having to do this, or should they be looking at a receiver to be explosive in the portal? And this is Tom's question, and I'll phrase it the way I did. If Penn State's number one goal is to be explosive, why don't you have more options beyond Keandre Lambert-Smith and Parker Washington, who are sophomores at best at this point? So do you think that that's a valid way to look at that, and should they address that in the portal to get at least one more veteran player to buttress those guys next year?
Look, like, if it's there, sure. But I think that there's people are ignoring the fact that Harrison Wallace has a decent amount of buzz and is a guy who is athletic, jumps out of the building, does right, like he presents.
He's hyper athletic.
Those, right, hyper athletic. Malik Mega is a guy who had some buzz last year. Even there are players on the team, just because you haven't seen them, because they can't beat out necessarily Parker Washington or Jahan. I mean, first of all, nobody's beating out Watson. I don't think anybody's going to beat out Parker Washington.
No, but I think
you might see Keandre Lambert-Smith get beat out, though. So I think Malik Mega might be on the field more this week.
So that is so I guess that's the question of, you arrived in a place where Cam Sullivan-Brown, and yesterday he answered our questions. I immediately understood when I met Cam Sullivan-Brown why that staff trusts him to be in that situation, because he's clearly an earnest, smart young man that they want to put out in those situations and give the opportunity to make plays. That being said, his physical talent has been sapped by all of the injuries. There's just no way around it. His career has been derailed by that. So then you find yourself in the situation where you got 2 tight ends, Parker Washington and Cam Sullivan-Brown, on the field, because you can't trust Keandre Lambert-Smith to catch the ball. That's the question of, have they done enough to be explosive? And the guys that you're talking about, Canadian wide receiver making his transition to college football in America, and a true freshman. And this is the transfer portal conversation of, you are relying on 2 redshirt freshmen at best with Lambert-Smith and Parker Washington. And the guys that we're going to talk about that are a part of the conversation going forward are all going to be freshmen. So there's the consistency issue that James Franklin talks about. Is that an avenue to go get somebody else? My assertion would be yes. You still need to go out and find a guy that can push these guys and make them earn it because they're all very young. And even Harrison Smith, very raw from his high school film. Sorry, Harrison Wallace. Harrison Smith plays safety for the Vikings.
Jaden Dotton is another guy. Had a little bit of, but I keep using buzz. That's the only.
Well, it's because
I know.
It's the word that we get. So you ask people who they're going to talk about, and then the name comes up, and that's what we get because we don't see them on the field. So, and that's why I'm always a little wary about those things too. But you're right; it is the information we get as far as who are the guys that are standing out amongst their peers, according to their peers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is. I think it's fair. I just think that there is some potential waiting in the wings for one reason or another, right? Guys who got injured, guys who weren't as far along in their development, and it's this constant conversation of who, for somebody to get on the field, somebody has to come off.
Yep,
and that's the constant back and forth. That's the constant equation and challenge that coaches have to face. But I don't think that there is necessarily an absence of talent at receiver. I feel somewhat, of all the position groups, that's one where I would say, like, let's compare it to running back, for instance, right?
Yep.
We've seen all the running backs.
Yep.
Visually, we've watched every single one of them. And maybe it's the
don't make me talk about him.
The devil versus the one that you don't. But like I think that the fact that we haven't seen some of these guys at receiver doesn't necessarily preclude them from being able to be pretty solid next season.
Yeah, and this is where I've kind of shifted in my development as an evaluator and somebody who's covering, the recruiting end all the way into the football application. Is I love upside. I love Malik Mega. I love the idea of Malik Mega at 6'4", runs like a sprinter. He is a big, intimidating receiver. You've got Liam Clifford, who I think is a high floor player, who is a good route runner already, and great hands, all those things. They're redshirting him to be ready for next year. So I'm not saying that I don't think that there's talent. My point, I guess, is that I thought Parker Washington was phenomenal, and he's been good. You're relying on freshmen. And the more I watch this, the more inconsistent that becomes, and the more you're relying on an unknown. And I think that that's how the coaching staff feels. And that's kind of where I'm trying to... I feel like we flipped positions. Early in the year, I was looking, when we were talking about our confidence factor in the depth chart and the talent at certain positions that was unproven, and you were saying veteran guys, and I'm saying, well, what about these young talented players? We've completely flipped on this conversation. One last thing I want to get to. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Malik Mega is going to be a third-year player next year.
Yep.
Like he will have been in the program. He will be in his third year. That's reasonable to start to expect somebody like that to make a pretty significant contribution.
Yeah,
that's all.
That's a fair point. So, I think that story is still yet to be written. Let's see. We have two more questions. Well, one more question, and I want to get to this one because it is the holiday season. It's a time to be thankful. We're a week away from Thanksgiving. So Honest J. Paterno says, progress happens too slowly to notice. Setbacks happen quickly, and we ignore them. Where's the progress over the past 2 seasons that we aren't seeing? What's positive? We always talk. We sat here for almost an hour now talking about all these things that need to be fixed or addressed from a program level all the way down to an individual player level. What are the good things, Nate? Give us some Thanksgiving.
That question sounded like a Chinese proverb.
It was very parabolic. It was very much a parable.
I liked it. I liked it a lot. I'm going to steal that. Look, I know nobody wants to hear it. Penn State's running game has been better over the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
Demonstrably better. It still hasn't made necessarily the stride in terms of the explosive plays, but it's been better. look, like the defense has been outstanding this season. I don't know that, again, there are so many, like, people look at the defense and see how many players won't be back next year, but they're forgetting the players who will be back, who weren't able to play this year or who didn't, for one reason or have missed some or all of the season. And then after that, you and I talked about this yesterday. The tight ends have had some disappointing performances for sure, but Mike Gesicki was terrible his sophomore year.
Yep.
And came back and is now an elite tight end in the NFL.
Is he a tight end?
Maybe.
Is he a tight end? Listen, and this is a total aside. I'm going to derail us because I've first off, he's a Miami Dolphin, so there's a problem. But secondly, there's no excuse for him not being able to block. He's 252 pounds. He is a big dude. Like, he should be able to block. That was always my biggest problem. I understand. So then he's not a tight end. Like,
okay,
that's just me being that is me being an intense sporting parent of seeing more potential and then not getting it, and then being like disappointed because you could be so much more. But that's neither here nor there.
Let him write his own story, pal.
He's an insane receiver. He is very good at being able to, go up and get the contested catch and all that stuff. So, total aside. But yeah, Theo Johnson has gotten better. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to mention individual players and kind of the progress that I think is important to point out. Ellis Brooks has turned into an all Big Ten linebacker. And a guy with that profile, if you're saying players don't develop in this program, and that's been a huge thing that people that want to be detractors of this coaching staff point to, is like, guys aren't developing. Ellis Brooks developed into a good football, like a really good football player. Brandon Smith has been getting better in the box each week. He is becoming a more physical presence in the run game. You look at guys at receiver. You mentioned Theo Johnson. I think he's gotten better. Sometimes the individual has to do some of the work. It's not like you just go out there and mind meld with a football player and then they know all the things you know. Like, they have to put in the work to do it as well. And you see the guys that do that. Malik Mega seems to be a guy that is putting in the work to become a good football player. So there is some progress, and it's not just the young guys, right? So this time of year, we're all focusing on the young guys that are going to be back next year. That what's the hope that springs eternal? Also focus on the guys that turned into good football players, because that's the process that's going to happen again once more. Our last question, Nate, is actually a statement.
Jesse Luketa?
Yes, thank you. There you go. There is a perfect example of a guy in a situation that I don't think any of us saw coming, but the coaching staff, they saw it coming. So our last thing I want to get out of here on this, because I think this is another really important thing, and I love this. Unfettered says, why does Penn State football make me so sad, T. Frank? I'm a grown man. It shouldn't affect me this much. Answer me that. I love the self-awareness here. I love the ability to see one's own soul. So I just wanted to end on a little bit of self-awareness and humanity, Nate. I thought that was great. And again, we head into a holiday week.
I've had some conversations with outside of the forum context with some fans, some followers, that kind of stuff, just private conversations this week. And I can't, I see two things. They're so mad. They're so frustrated.
Yep.
And just at their wits' end. And I see that and I say, hey, if Penn State could bottle that up and find a way to convert that into development and progress for the program, that would be good for Penn State football.
Yeah.
The other thing that I see is, and again, like, this is kind of a reflection on the disconnect of doing this for 17 years and not being a fan, is I don't get it anymore. Like, I don't understand. I don't even understand the concept of, like, having your day be even slightly thrown askew by the result of a football game, which is like, I understand how that sounds, but to me, it says, Oh, well, no, you are truly objective about this. You are truly just calling balls and strikes and seeing it for what it is. And it's no sweat off your back either way. And that is what I always want to do. That's what I'm striving to do, is present an unfiltered look to people. But I get it. Like,
Yeah.
There is a ton of frustration, and like you said, the parent side of things, of seeing potential unrealized. I totally understand.
Yeah.
But I would simply argue for Penn State football that, under James Franklin's leadership, Penn State has worked its way out of situations like this before, and history doesn't necessarily dictate it, but it's like, people did not expect Penn State to be 8-0 in 2019, going in, like, nobody predicted an 11-2 season coming off of whatever that was, 8-5.
2019, you mean?
That's what I'm saying. Well, 2019's performance coming off of a 2018 season,
right,
where they lost a ton of players.
Yep.
And didn't have that good of a year for Trace McSorley's senior season.
Yep.
2015 was not a good year going into 2016, where obviously they, go to the Rose Bowl. So, no, I think that when people take a step back, they don't initially see some of the reasons for optimism, but they should be there. They've done this before.
And I want, because we're more than out of time, but I always like to give a quick preview of the game, and we didn't quite get to that. So I'm just going to give you a quick synopsis of what I saw on film today, or this week, on Rutgers. First off, Rutgers wants to play man coverage. They don't always, because they're bad at it. So Penn State, if they have an offensive line, it's another game where they can score points. Defensively, Rutgers is good at stopping the run. Does that matter? And also, they're good at stopping the run in comparison to where they were previously. Offensively, they have no explosive talent, so Penn State shouldn't have a problem with them. The only thing I'd say is Noah Vedral is the first actual dual threat quarterback they're going to face this year. So Penn State's emphasis on keeping quarterbacks in the pocket and not opening up running lanes, that's going to be tested for the first time this year, as far as actually a guy that can then break the pocket and run downfield. They're going to be facing a Sean Clifford-like quarterback who doesn't throw the ball nearly as well. So again, Rutgers, they play tough football, so it might be close because, Nate, as you've said, that's what this year is going to be. So that's your quick thumbnail of Rutgers. Are you ready for this weekend? Are you excited?
Pound the under. Whatever it is, it's too high. 6-3.
Oh,
I'm not excited at all, but I'll go. I'll do it. It's the job.
That's the BWI Daily Edition. We'll be back tomorrow. Ryan Snyder's Best Bets. More on Penn State and Rutgers in that, as we always talk about the game. That's our featured game of the weekend, is Best Bets. And, of course, recruiting news to end the week. The BWI live show will be after Penn State and Rutgers. Tom Hannafin joining me. He is off assignment and back on the post-game show. All of that coming up this week from Blue White Illustrated. Make sure you subscribe.